Welcome to the last part of Unit 2. As we've learned in this unit, global climate change has already had observable effects on the environment, from sea level rise to intensifying weather events. In this last part, we'll be focusing on climate change impacts in Hawaii specifically. Let's get started. In previous lessons, we learned about a few marine impacts already threatening Hawaii's oceans and shorelines. Coastal areas throughout Hawaii have experienced a loss of shoreline due to sea level rise. Areas like Waikiki on the island of Oahu have experienced dramatic coastline changes. As you may remember, it's not just the shorelines that are being impacted. Low-lying areas further inland will also be impacted as sea level rises underground. During extreme tides, seawater can also come up through storm drains and create sunny day flooding, as we have seen in parts of Honolulu in recent years. Coral reefs are valuable ecosystems to Hawaii, but threats like coral bleaching and ocean acidification are threatening these ecosystems. We learned in past activities the severity of the 2015 coral bleaching event and how the ocean becoming more acidic is affecting coral and other shell-building marine life. Have your teachers or family members ever talked about conserving water? They might have suggested taking shorter showers or turning off the water when brushing your teeth. More frequently, we are seeing this advisory of conserving fresh water due to drought conditions. In the last lesson on extreme weather, we learned that climate change can cause both more extreme precipitation events and longer periods of dry weather. While some regions of the United States are expected to experience more precipitation overall due to climate change, Hawaii is forecasted to receive less rain and more drought-like conditions. This is partially due to the fact that climate change is expected to impact El Niño weather patterns and affect the trade winds that normally bring rain to the islands. With these drought-like conditions come a number of impacts, including limited freshwater resources. In Hawaiian, "vai" is the word for fresh water, and there is a common expression, "ola ika vai," or water is life. Unfortunately, Hawaii's freshwater supply is being impacted by drought and sea level rise. Less precipitation means not only less water in our streams, but also less water entering our aquifers. An aquifer is an underground layer of permeable rock, sediment, or soil that yields water. You can think of it as a natural underground storage tank for fresh water. Water can be pumped from aquifers to be used for drinking water, household use, irrigation crops, and more. In addition to having less water in our aquifers, sea level rise also caused by climate change can cause seawater from under the freshwater lens to rise up and contaminate these freshwater sources from below. As you will learn in one of this unit's activities, overpumping can also cause this to happen. We've learned about a number of key indicators of climate change. Let's take a closer look at a few impacting Hawaii. Climate change can lead to changes in the habitats of Hawaii's native species, many of which are endangered. Changes in temperature and precipitation can change where certain species can live and impact their food sources. For example, the population of native ahina or silver sword has already been impacted by drier high elevation conditions. It can also allow invasive plants and animals to expand their range and outcompete native species. One example of this is mosquitoes, which can transmit diseases to native birds. For Hawaii's native birds, one of the last refuge is in high elevation native forest habitats, too cool to host mosquitoes carrying avian malaria. But climate change has been driving up temperatures in Hawaii, allowing mosquitoes to move towards the summit. Sadly, many species have been extinct, and more forest birds are expected to join that list, as threats like habitat loss, introduced predators, and diseases continue. As we learned in the last lesson, climate change can also cause weather events such as hurricanes to become more extreme. The high winds, flooding, and storm surge associated with these events can cause a lot of damage to infrastructure. Infrastructure refers to physical and organizational structures and facilities like buildings and roads. Another potential impact of a hotter and drier climate is an increase in wildfires. Hawaii has seen an increase in wildfires affecting human safety, infrastructure, drinking water, agricultural production, native forests, and watersheds. Here's a wildfire incident map from the year 2000 to 2012 for each of the 6 main Hawaiian islands. Larger dots indicate larger fires in terms of acres burned. Many of these fires are near roadsides, threatening infrastructures and communities. Land changes like the ones we've seen on Maui can also increase the chance of wildfires. We'll explore wildfires in one of the activities. It's not just the environment that is being impacted by climate change. Many of the climate change impacts that we have discussed also affect human health. In this section, we'll explore 3 of these threats. Let's start with extreme heat. Hawaii is recording record-breaking temperatures in the last few years. In 2019, a record high temperature of 97 degrees was recorded in Kahului. When people are exposed to extreme heat, they can suffer from potentially deadly illnesses such as heat exhaustion and heat stroke. The most vulnerable include older adults, young children, low-income populations, people with poor health, and those that work outside. Urban areas in particular are vulnerable because they experience the heat island effect. This is where elevated temperatures are experienced in urban areas due to an increase in buildings and hot asphalt, trapping the heat and contributing to the warming effect. An example of a city experiencing this in Hawaii is Honolulu. The number of days with record high temperatures in Hawaii are expected to increase. Projections by Climate Central anticipate almost 100 heat wave days in 1 year by the year 2050. Earlier we talked about the threats to native forest birds by mosquitoes. Mosquitoes also pose a threat to humans by transmitting diseases. 2 species of mosquitoes found here in Hawaii can transmit diseases like dengue and Zika virus. These diseases can cause serious illness. In 2016, a dengue fever outbreak of about 250 confirmed cases was recorded in Hawaii, primarily on the Big Island. The virus was transmitted locally after mosquitoes bit infected travelers. One suggestion to adapt to this is paying attention to new vector-borne diseases. Since mosquitoes breed in water, being aware of mosquito breeding sites like standing water and using mosquito repellent are examples of mitigation efforts. We learned earlier about how the combination of less rainfall and rising sea levels can reduce the availability of fresh water. However, contamination of fresh water is another threat that can occur after severe storms and flooding. For example, storm surge and flooding can cause contaminants like pesticides, bacteria, fecal matter, and excess nutrients to enter water supplies. These events can also overwhelm or damage water treatment plants, where contaminants are usually filtered out of drinking water. This can result in serious waterborne illnesses such as typhoid fever, cholera, leptospirosis, and hepatitis A. They can also make mosquito-borne diseases more likely since standing water allows more mosquitoes to breed. Although this isn't as much of a threat to Hawaii due to the better infrastructure planning, the severity of these events are increasing, making it a possible threat in the future. This highlights the importance of planning our infrastructure accordingly, an example of an adaptation. The good news is that there is a lot that we can do to make our communities more resilient to the impacts of climate change. In Unit 3, we will focus on climate change solutions. Let's go over the activities for Part 4. In the first activity, Vi in the Era of Climate Change, we'll learn about how freshwater sources in Hawaii are being impacted by climate change. In the second activity, Wildfires in Hawaii, we'll look at Hawaii's wildfire history and what communities are most at risk. In the last activity, we'll explore how climate change affects human health. Complete the Part 4 quiz and wrap up the unit by taking the Unit 2 test.